So, Joe, we have a pretty exciting New Year's treat for our members this year, and that is we're going to give them a sneak behind the curtain of what it is like to be an accompanying spouse. And we have our very own, what do we call you? Test bunny? Something better than that? What do you want to be called?
Ooh, what could I be called? Well, no, I feel maybe like a lab rat.
Okay, love that. I
Yes, yes, Buddy is so much nicer than lab rat. Let's not go with lab rat. I think maybe it's like, for those of you who've spent time in startup land who might have listened to Startup, which was a podcast series. Did you ever hear about this? It was an American guy who started a startup and it was a podcasting business, and he podcasted his whole startup journey, including like recording his investor meetings, like his conversations lying in bed with his wife, his like
wow.
ponderings. And he ended up selling the business. I can't remember who bought it, but for like millions of dollars. Like, it did really well, but it was just the most fascinating look under the hood. And you had this very brilliant idea the other day, because I was talking to you in a bit of a flap and said, "Hey, you're doing a thing and we should record it." So, do you want me to tell you, our listeners, our viewers, our members, my thing?
Yes. Tell us the thing.
Well, the thing. My husband, Hugh, got received an email that was from a company that he had interviewed with for a role in Switzerland nearly 12 months ago, and said, "Hey, I know that it didn't sort of work out last time, but we've got a role going. Would you be interested in it?" And my husband was like, "Do you want to move to Bangkok?" And I was like, "Okay." And he said, "Yes." And he has since resigned from his other job and accepted a job. And so that's
So,
exciting.
you're coming back to Southeast Asia with me, which is fantastic. And for our members, we thought this would be a really great opportunity to go on the journey, literally, with someone who is at the beginning of that accompanying partner journey. But what I thought would be really good, Joe, is if we maybe took a step back and talked about what you've been going through for the last year, because this is sort of, like you said, that there was that initial interview a year ago, and now this is actually happening a year on. And I know from my own experience, it was quite similar. There was this job sort of dangled, and then there was it just the process of actually moving is often a really long one, and that experience of being in that what am I doing, not knowing what's happening, trying to imagine a future. And then, I mean, you imagined Switzerland for a little while, and then that got ripped away with you. And I know there were other opportunities along the way. And so I thought it might be good just to start there and have a little bit of a chat about what's that been like over the last year, and then we can dive into where you're at now. Because before we hit record, Joe was talking about booking flights for her sort of recce to Bangkok. But let's rewind back to a year ago when all this started.
So I think I might rewind even a little bit further. So, just to give those of you who haven't sort of heard my origin story and why this sort of business came about in the first place, was that I spent a number of years as an Australian expat in Singapore, again, accompanying my husband for his career and with our two daughters. And we, while in Singapore, were sort of, I guess, our experience and our time there was cut shorter than we were planning and expecting, because my husband's job got made redundant. So we had a sort of pretty tumultuous end to our time in Singapore that was not on our terms, that was not on a timeline that we were particularly keen about. We are very aware of like how lucky, and I genuinely use the word luck, and I'm not really like a luck person, but my birth privilege of being born in Australia and having us both having Australian passports his redundancy was a pain and was cutting short our experience and our time in Singapore. But we had the privilege of being able to come back to a country where we could get jobs and, slot back in. We gave the tenants in our house notice and sort of moved back into our family home that we owned and stuff. And so our transition back to home country wasn't too traumatic, which I know a lot of people, particularly when there's a redundancy involved, can be really, really traumatic, particularly if you come from a country that you may have actively been trying to leave or avoid and things. And so I just want to note that that was a real privilege for us being able to transition back. But with that, acknowledging that privilege, I also want to just sort of, and I guess Emma, you've been on the receiving end of this when we're not recording like our conversations for public digestion. But I've found this last 18 months, so we've been back in Australia for well nearly 19 months. I've found it very challenging. I've found it very challenging personally in that I felt we weren't ready to leave, and the timeline was not our own, and I didn't feel that we got to make choices in our relocation back to Australia. And I am very aware that people have talked a lot over the years around, for every year you're away, you need a year at home to sort of adjust and recalibrate and get back into life and the norm of things and those sorts of aspects of relocation. And I think this is another whole piece that you and I can explore further about what repatriation looks like, or moving home if you're only sort of doing things on a smaller scale, or just, that transition back. But that's like another whole kettle of fish that we can discuss at a later date. But I have found being home challenging in that I think a lot of people will appreciate, even when they go home for a holiday, that no one's actually really that interested in what you're doing, and no one's actually really, they don't really care much after like having a few conversations around, oh, was it so fun, and what was it like, and how was the humidity, and did the kids eat spicy food now? Like, those are the sort of conversations that I had. But after that, people aren't particularly interested, because it's generally so abstract for someone else to try and comprehend what life abroad or elsewhere is like, that you sort of feel like a bit of a pimple on a pumpkin. You sort of feel like you, and for me, because we moved back to where where we lived for years, we've moved back into a rural community, so it's a lot smaller. A lot less people do what we did, which was leaving and coming back. And so it's just such a disconnect as far as our experience to what so many of our friends have and live at home. So I did genuinely feel coming home quite hard, and I've felt that I've almost had one foot out the door that whole time. And so while I've actively built a remote career to be able to do all of the things, and work has definitely been my saving grace over this last 18 months, but my physical location has been a real challenge for me. And
Yeah,
so,
I
like you
just as
said,
someone,
oh, sorry.
sorry, no, because as someone who's been on the sidelines of this with you, I do think that part of what has added to that is, as you said, it was a redundancy that brought you back earlier than you expected, and so you've constantly been scanning for what the next opportunity is. So it's been your mind has been elsewhere because of that as well. So I think just to put that there, that it's not that just, I think, the resettling, it was actually the, hang on, what are we doing next? I think that would be something that people are quite familiar with as well, that, okay, this is what we want. What are we going to do? Are we going to settle down and make this home again, or are we going to keep looking for opportunities? And that not knowing is hard.
Yeah, and I think for us, we had really, we had really almost made our bed and said, okay, like, we're done. We'd had this sort of, like you mentioned, a carrot dangled. We had a very long period of time where Hugh had applied for a role. He had 6 interviews over a 4.5 month period, was offered the role, and then we just couldn't get the package to work and things, and so he ended up declining the role. And to then have that company come back maybe 6 or 7 months later, and because they obviously had wanted him and had offered the job and he'd turned it down, they were like, well, we know we want you in the business, and this other role had come up, and the job in Switzerland, the boss had sort of said to the Asian boss, like, there's this guy here. I think because that process had been so drawn out, and we'd sort of said, we need to make a decision, and we need to settle, and we need to stop looking over the fence, and we need to stop looking for jobs, and we need to commit. We'd sort of done that in our head, and then have this email land in his inbox, and we were like, YOLO, let's go. We're going. And so I think I'm really interested in sort of, I guess, vlogging this almost, as it's happening, and doing this. So Emma and I, we have a weekly meeting, and we've just said we're going to just record the start of the meetings and sort of just checking in with how things are going and things that are progressing and all of those bits and pieces.
So I just want to pick up on 2 things there. The first one is something, when we were doing our research before we sort of relaunched as ellora, one of the words that we picked up on for our members, and we tested this with focus groups as part of it, is adventurous. And so I think that concept of YOLO, and you only live once, for people who aren't familiar, that's something that I think our members are really familiar with. Like, to pick up your life and follow someone across the world, or to a new city, or even to like a new state, whatever it is, that's adventurous. And I think that's awesome to sort of acknowledge that that's part of what, I mean, that's obviously part of your relationship, but it's also part of what drives you. Did you want to talk to that anymore? That adventurous part of you?
Well,
Is that something that's always been there? Like, what's behind that you guys can just say yes to an opportunity that lands in your inbox when you've made the decision that, no, we're settling down? Like, and for our members, you've got 2 young girls, but they're not teeny tiny. They're sort of on the cusp of adolescence. And this was the second point that I wanted to get into, because I know, like, we're here for the professional, but as accompanying partners, we often end up carrying the personal as well. And you've had some big stuff happening with your kids as well. Like, your daughter just got named head girl, and you're ripping her away. So can you pick up those 2 things, the adventure and managing the personal?
Okay, well, I will pick up on something there. Thank you. That language around me ripping her out of her school captaincy, and the trauma that I am instilling into my child. Yeah, look, what I was just sort of going to say, was tapping into this, is that I think because you hear me talking about these things, like the personal package, the relocation, then we talk shop as far as work, and us recording these bits and pieces, I'm really interested in being able to be as honest as I can with these bits. And thank you for drawing on those 2 bits. So I think there's 2 things to pull on there. The adventurous piece, I will own that, in that I'm the daughter of 2 very adventurers. My parents were reformed hippies that sort of, did they bought one-way tickets from Australia to Singapore in the 70s, and then they backpacked to London, and then they spent years traveling around in Africa, and they have bounced around and done all sorts of interesting things over the years. So that's definitely been in my DNA. But for my husband, it has been very different. He is, he's one of 4 kids born into a conservative farming family, like generational farming. Like, he was the 6th generation, like, in their family, living on this same farm that they've all, lived in the same house generationally. And so he's always been a bit of a black sheep, in that he had definitely travelling bugs and has spent time living abroad and things like this. But the 2 of us, definitely, it has worked with that adventure side of things. I think both of us have sort of experienced loss in life, which we have always really very much talked about the fact of, would we be happy hearing our eulogy at our own funeral? And have we pumped enough out of life with that? But also, my father, while we were in Singapore, actually was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so, me being torn with this concept of like, oh, should I still be in Oz and a bit more accessible for my dad while he's still like compass and all of those bits and pieces. But I sort of flagged that with him and he was furious with me. He was like, don't you dare stay at home or don't you dare not do these things because of me. He's like, I would never be able to live with myself if you were not doing the adventuring if on behalf of staying to have time with me. He's like, absolutely not. So that adventure sort of feeding in there, I think is really just an interesting thing to add in the mix there. But as far as my kids, so I've got two daughters, one who has just turned 12 and the other will turn 10 in March. And like you said, they are a lot less sort of portable this time. They were 6 and 8 when we left last time and sort of had no real concept of what we were doing or whatever. And we Googled cool things for kids in Singapore and found that there was actually, you'd know it, Black Tap in Marina Bay Sands. It's like an American style burger bar thing, but they make these milkshakes that came out that they had like pieces of chocolate cake or fairy floss or all these insane milkshakes. And we showed the girls a couple of YouTube videos of these and they were like, we said, when we move to Singapore, you can have one of those on our first weekend. And they were like, okay. Whereas now I was like, okay, what am I going to bribe them with this time? And like the 12-year-olds were like, well, I would like to go to Paris for the weekend. And I was like, well, let's get the map out because that's not quite where we're at or no. But it's proving a lot more challenging, like causing me angst and lots of discussions between us as the parents, lots of discussions. Look, the 10-year-old is pretty much on board, but the 10-year-old's pretty much on board, but the 12-year-old we're finding really challenging. She's really questioning, why do we need to do this? Like, why do you need to do this? Like, this is, our life is great here. My friends are here. I've just got school captain. So she's just gone into her final year of primary school in Southern Hemisphere. So she's the school captain of her primary school. And she is sort of almost taking it as a bit of a personal attack on her. We're like ruining her life and those sorts of things. And so it's been very emotional with her this time. And I just have so much empathy for anyone trying to do this with kids even older than her, because I feel like we're just, and Hugh and I say quite regularly, we're just on the cusp of it being diabolical. And
Yeah.
she's she's pushing me and she's pushing us, and so that takes a lot of our airtime. Our pillow talk's pretty damn boring at the moment. It's discussing how we're managing her feelings and then Googling condos in Bangkok. Like, that's pretty much all we do when we lie in bed now. So it's it's a lot going on. But I think, like I said, what I'm really excited about sort of like logging this as we go along is to be able to sort of talk about those, they seem like silly little things. And just before we started recording, I started saying to Emma that yesterday I was trying to, book some flights. So I will be joining Hugh for the second week of this first 2 week stint. Just we'll leave the kids here and I'll head over to sort of get the lay of the land. And as part of his package, we have a recce that they will pay for, that we can bring the whole family over to have a look. And Hugh and I sort of discussed, well, do you need to come twice? And this is just something that we have decided to do. So on our own steam that I'll fly over, is because I'm having to still sell this to the kids. I want to go over there and nail it. Like, I want to know how to use the trains. I want to know where I'm going to be taking them. I want to not, I'm happy to do lots of learning in front of them when we all get there and do those things. But for this, I feel like I need the recce that we take them on to win. I need to win that in order just to smooth the things out. And so, yeah, I'm going over, but just even I can't sort of get my head around doing the things. I'm normally a super organized person, and even just trying to book these flights yesterday, I was just like, I can't. I need, I needed Hugh to come and help me. Be like, okay, just come on these days and book this flight because we're trying to then do things with points, so we don't have to pay for all the things and some of the all of these things. And I was just like, ah. And I was just blaming it on my perimenopausal brain, but you were like, yeah, it could be that, but it also could be the fact that there's like a whole lot of stuff going
I
on.
was
So,
definitely encouraging you to be a bit kinder to yourself. And I think that's something that a lot of people will be able to relate to because as the accompanying partner, you don't have the luxury of a job that is setting you up. You don't have an office that you're going to and colleagues that are welcoming you, and that's kind of the thing. And so there's a lot of support around that, in that that your partner needs to be game ready to start this new job and hit the ground running, but that means all that other stuff is left to you. So that, yes, it's great to show our kids how to make mistakes, but also, like, you don't want to be in the middle of Bangkok with no idea where you are and two kids hating it. Like, you need to be able to be a leader in that space as well, plus all the other stuff. Plus, like, you've got businesses that you're running, and that's a real thing. And I think maybe it would be helpful. We don't want to give too much ellora business strategy, but like, I think it is helpful for people to know that the way we work is super supportive. And so we've had conversations last year and this year about, what, Joe's going to need some time to just focus on this, and that's the number one priority for you, and we're going to make it work so that you have that. Because, like, and I know that you consciously chose business partners in me and in the other businesses that you're doing that will support that, but I think it's a luxury, but it's also really, really important, and it's something that we really, really value in the way we work, and I hope that we're bringing to the sort of whole community of ellora as well. So yes, definitely be kind to yourself. Maybe it's perimenopause, but it's definitely a whole lot of other shit as well.
100%. But I think as well, like, I am always up for unsolicited advice. So if any of our members are like, oh, well, have you tried this, or have you thought of this, or if you've done anything? So we're going to sort of just record the start of our meeting every week, and you'll get an update on what's happening in the mayhem that is the Palmer household, and you can hear what's going on. But always happy for suggestions, recommendations, introductions. If you know anyone in Bangkok that I should be having a coffee with once I get there, I'm super open to that. And yes, I make very good selections in my business partners, obviously, as far as doing these things. But also, like, exactly that, like having those people that are your complete cheer squad around you as well. Like, the people that I immediately pinged when this sort of was on the cards, that they were like, amazing. And I could tell you haven't been quite settled. I could see you were itchy, and could see, that there was something still cooking away with you two. And I'm like so stoked. And also the fact that Bangkok is very convenient for anyone that's flying through Asia in any direction. And so I'm sure we're going to get lots of visitors as well. But I'm super excited to sort of almost just have this as well for me to reflect back on down the track, that we will have like an actual recording of our conversations, and sort of almost like having a diary entry that I can watch back later on down the track, that I think will be really interesting and interesting to reflect on, and all of those bits and pieces. So I've got so much stuff to talk to you about. I feel like this is a nice little intro to it, but like the visa applications, and you know, getting someone to take our dog, and we're selling our farm, and we're doing all of the things. So um, until our next installment.
Yes, and if people have, questions or things they want asked of Joe, we'll put that. There'll be a chat, and you can put that in there. But yeah, welcome, and we hope you enjoy.